Excerpt from The Three Old Rascals, taken from Who Killed Honor Bright by Patricia Hughes. In 1926, policemen had to be male, physically fit, of imposing build, able to handle a gun, and able to gain control of the local populace by force, if necessary. Leopold J. Dillon fitted the picture exactly. Born in Cardiff in 1900, he was the same age as Lily O'Neill. However, she came from a dirt-poor rural Irish family, whereas he was brought up in Wales and was relatively affluent. Tall, strong, and formidable, he was said to have enlisted in the British Army and become second lieutenant by 1917, when he was discharged. However, there is no evidence of this. Evidence does show that he enlisted as private in the Artists' Rifles in 1919, Regimental number 8752. It was an officer training corps whose recruits had to be recommended for entry, so he would have expected to become second lieutenant. However, the corps was taken off live duty in 1920 and became a part-time territorial force, so he was demobbed before he reached promotion. On discharge, he enrolled as a medical student at Trinity College, Dublin, and studied for 1 year, but did not qualify for the second. On the 20th of August 1923, he joined the newly established Garda Síochána as constable, but resigned from this undisciplined force on the 12th of November the same year. Subsequently, however, when Eowyn O'Duffy had become the new commissioner and Sinn Féin's Colonel David Neligan had become head of G-Force, the detective force, his brother persuaded him to rejoin. He did so on the 10th of December 1924. After a 6-week course, he was promoted on 6th of February 1925 to the post of superintendent of 3 large police districts south of Dublin, covering most of Wicklow, part of Carlow, and half of Kildare. He was only 24 years old, but his military officer training, health, imposing appearance, and also the severe shortage of men after First World War would have influenced this decision. Based in the small town of Dunlavin, Dillon's most southern district included Blessington. As well as being a full-time, inexperienced superintendent, Dillon was known to have at least one other part-time occupation, working as a screw or warder of Mountjoy Prison in Dublin. His army experience, including military techniques and use of ammunition, were useful for various short contracts, and his physical presence gave him great authority. In 1925, Patrick Purcell was married and of average height. He had done his medical training at Trinity College in Dublin and became general practitioner at Blessington, a prosperous town in County Wicklow. Married with 2 children, he had also become the local peace commissioner, acting as magistrate and carrying out medical duties for the local constabulary. He worked closely with Superintendent Dillon to prevent and punish crime. He was only 30, but police were very much depleted in personnel as a result of the First World War. So many men had been killed or badly injured. That meant there were also many lonely young women. Therefore, like so many other married men, he had a clandestine lover in Dublin called Bridie, whom he met 2 or 3 times a month. Her real name was Madge Hopkins. She was Lily's best friend. Dillon approached Purcell on the afternoon of Tuesday, June 8, 1925, at a summer fete in Blessington, and asked for use of his sports car, as his own motorbike was out of commission. It was the hottest day of the year, and he asked Purcell to drive him to Dublin for a meeting, since Purcell would be meeting Bridie that evening. Dillon also suggested Bridie should bring along her friend as a blind date for himself. At 7:30 in the morning of Wednesday, June 9th, 1925, a hot, sunny morning, Felix Riley was walking past Ticknock Crossroads outside Dublin to fetch his horses for the day's work. He saw a young woman lying on the ground and went to wake her, thinking she was asleep. Then he noticed some blood on her chest. She was dead. He ran a 1/4 mile to the only house in this rural location, a pub called Lem Doyle's, and the eponymous landlord phoned the police. Superintendent John Reynolds arrived soon after, accompanied by a police sergeant with a camera. His photographs showed the location of the body, the ground around it, and the wound. Reynolds also informed the coroner, Dr. J.P. Brennan, who arrived about an hour later. He had served under Michael Collins and was an experienced judge and magistrate, well respected for his honesty. After examining the body and wound in C2, they removed it to the outhouse of the nearby public house. This time, a crowd had gathered, and there was soon a queue to see the body. Despite the recent civil war and the long-standing political unrest, this murder was completely shocking to the general public, who flocked to hear and read everything available about it. Crowds gathered to hear Brennan's inquest. Interest was so high that every newspaper, broadsheet or tabloid, national or local, secular or religious, unionist or republican, in English or Irish language, had front-page headline articles on it for weeks. Coroner Brennan opened the inquest the following morning by deprecating the local population because they were unwilling to volunteer to be on the jury despite enormous popular interest, or perhaps because of it. Yates' affair with Honor Bright was already fairly well known within parts of Dublin where everyone knew each other. Brennan made a short speech about the victim, a young lady about 26. Her clothes were undisturbed and the bullet had killed her instantly. In his estimation, she was a decent, innocent victim of a heinous crime, and he hoped the perpetrator would soon be caught and punished. At about 2 p.m. on Thursday the 10th of June, while the inquest was still in progress, Commissioner Eowyn O'Duffy appeared without warning. He took Brennan aside, told him to adjourn the inquest for 3 weeks, and informed him that he would be taking over the case himself and relieving Brennan and Reynolds of their responsibility for it. Both were to relinquish their posts for this case. Both had been seasoned British professionals long before Southern Ireland became a free state, so both objected to this absurd change to the normal routine. Their views were neither heard in public, but Superintendent Reynolds was very angry. Brennan adjourned the inquest and left the body in the pub outhouse so that relatives could come forward and claim the body for burial. But no relatives had appeared by the next day. The police authorities subsequently buried the corpse at Kilgoban Cemetery near Stepaside after the second post-mortem ordered by Neligan had taken place, approximately on July 1st, well before a judge could check its controversial findings. Also on Wednesday the 10th of June, Superintendent Dillon gave himself up and admitted to the murder. 2 days later, his accomplice, Dr. Purcell, was arrested. Chief Superintendent Colonel David Neligan had them both in custody in Dublin Castle by the 12th of June. 3 weeks later, O'Duffy allowed Neligan to resume the inquest at a local school. Public feeling was higher and had not dissipated at all. Once again, loud, incredulous throngs of people gathered. Rumors were rife about what had been done and why. The Garda were under pressure. The new Free State was anxious to establish its political credentials to the rest of the world, to show that it could function well without British influence. If it could not, Britain would re-establish control. It was extremely important, therefore, to play down the fact that individuals from the Garda Síochána had carried out this murder, and to absolve Free State politicians of acting outside the law. They had to prevent the public, who doubted their integrity, from insurrection, and reassert political authority. David Neligan was already a famous figure. He had worked for Michael Collins, the great Irish nationalist, who signed the Anglo-English Treaty on December 1921, creating the Irish Free State, a self-governing British colony similar to Canada. Collins had previously worked as a British civil servant and used his knowledge and experience of British administration to rid Britain of its most effective functionaries in Ireland, thus demoralizing British forces and paving the way for their defeat. One of his most valuable informers was Neligan, also a British civil servant, but working at Dublin Castle, headquarters of the British in Ireland. Despite his daily work for the British administration, Neligan was avidly against British occupation of Ireland, so he volunteered to assist Collins secretly, initially by giving him personal details of British staff, including addresses and daily routines, later by organizing military or guerrilla assaults on small groups and individuals. When Collins was shot dead in August 1922, Neligan was promoted by Sinn Féin to colonel later. By his inception, O'Higgins gave him responsibility for the detective section, G Squad, of the new Garda Síochána as chief superintendent. Neligen was cold-blooded and efficient, and was well known for his ruthless determination to see every contract through to the end. He never undertook anything he could not complete. Justice Minister O'Higgins had acted privately at the request of Mrs. George Yates, because Senator William Butler Yates's Catholic Republican working-class lover had borne him a son and could put his reputation under threat. He had privately contracted Garda Superintendent Leopold Dillon to ask Lily O'Neill to end her relationship with Yates, and also to disclose her son's name and address. On the completion of his contract, Dillon reported directly to O'Higgins, knowing that he would be protected. O'Higgins then ordered Neligen to reconstitute the murder to hide the involvement of its perpetrators, and also to remove any link between Yates and Lily. As before, for obvious reasons, there is no direct evidence to confirm this, but circumstantial evidence, which will be explained later, make it quite clear who was responsible for what. The inquest started by Coroner Brennan, plus all evidence he and Superintendent Reynolds had collected at the scene of the crime, was completely discarded. These two seasoned professionals were removed from the case completely. Later, their names were used to produce false evidence, as will be shown. There is no documentation available to prove these allegations because it happened secretly at Dublin Castle, headquarters of Garda Síochána. The police records of this case of 90 years ago have never been released, despite many requests. Such documentation does, however, still exist. All this took place within 1 week in early June 1925. Lily O'Neill was murdered at approximately 3 a.m. on June 9th. After Dillon and Purcell were taken into custody, the next 7 months were spent interviewing witnesses and taking statements in order to eliminate unwanted evidence and edit events, by force, if necessary. Dillon and Purcell were kept in custody from arrest until their trial, so that they were out of contact with the public enraged by the murder, and so that the chief superintendent could school them in their new stories. Neligen's role was complicated. He had to exonerate Justice Minister O'Higgins, Superintendent Dillon, and Peace Commissioner Dr. Purcell, whilst preserving the reputation of the Free State to avoid British interest in the case and any subsequent attempt to take over control of the state. It was also imperative to eliminate any involvement of Senator Yates or his wife, which meant hiding from public view the real identity of Honor Bright and her son. The easiest way of doing this was to reconstitute her as a prostitute, since this would make her socially unacceptable and below public or political recognition. After Dillon gave himself up, admitting that he had killed Honor Bright, O'Higgins told George and Yates immediately. Yates's severe grief and depression, referred to by Senator Joseph Hone as heart's troubles, dates from this time. O'Higgins and Neligen devised a plot making Lily a prostitute. Such a story would eliminate suspicion of the Free State and O'Higgins, since prostitution was seen as due to impoverishment of Irish families, caused by the British before the instigation of the Free State. It would also remove Kevin as Yates's heir. If his mother was a prostitute, anyone could be his father. The objective for Yates and his wife was to face down rumors. It was imperative that Yates should stop having anything more to do with Kevin. He must disown him completely, otherwise the whole subterfuge would flounder. They were to project themselves as a traditional family and keep away from prying eyes or ears. Yates must maintain political correctness. He had no choice in the matter, having been confronted with a fait accompli. By this time, the murder of Honor Bright held front-page headlines in every newspaper in Dublin. Every section of society was intrigued. It was much easier to claim that it was simply a random event with no consequences, the accidental murder of nobody important. This would protect the Garda and judiciary, and also remove the political stains. 1925 was an era of deference, and Lily was in the wrong section of society for judicial concern. Property law rather than love dictated marriage partnerships, so adultery was condoned provided it was discreet. However, this was not simple adultery. Lily's son was in the care of a clever woman and her partner who both knew his father. They could be expected to tell the son about his father as soon as he could understand. Madge Hopkins was in the same position. Other people also knew of Yates's son. Since Yates was well known for being straightforward, he had always up to now been an honest man. Maud certainly knew of Lily's pregnancy and its source, and so did Oliver St. John, Goggerty, and John Quinn. All Dubliners were renowned for their curiosity, particularly about those with money, authority, or glamour. Knowing the father of Lily's child meant understanding the political aspects of this murder. A poor, young, Catholic nationalist woman having a secret affair with a comparatively rich, elderly, Unionist Nobel Prize winner, world-famous poet, and married senator. Was this how politicians in the new Free State acted? She had borne him a son before his wife had done so that the illegitimate one had more claim to his wealth than the legitimate one. Was this an example of moral standards in the new Free State? The senator's clandestine lover had been murdered by an officer of the Garda Síochána acting for the Minister of Justice, who was working secretly on behalf of the senator's wife. Was the whole Irish government corrupt? But why did the case come to court at all? It would have been much less politically embarrassing to sack the perpetrators in disgrace with no pension and give the victims' relatives compensation. A couple of small paragraphs in the newspaper would have been quite acceptable for the majority of people. It would have spared the reputation of the ministry and the police if this murder could have been dealt with privately. But public interest was incredibly high and had to be calmed down. The simplest way to do this was to settle the case legally, so that no one was able to object. Yates wrote The Three Monuments in 1925, just after Lily's murder. They hold their public meetings where our most renowned patriots stand, one among the birds of the air, a stumpier on either hand. And all the popular statesmen say that purity built up the state, and after kept it from decay. Admonish us to cling to that, and let all base ambition be. For intellect would make us proud, and pride bring in impurity. The three old rascals laugh aloud. This poem is about three unnamed fellow officials of the Free State: O'Higgins, O'Duffy, and Neligan. In Yates's opinion, they are using the dignity of those who have upheld the state in the past, our most renowned patriots, usurping it to their own advantage. They hold sticks to bang the ground to bring attention to themselves, a stumpier in either hand, so that people will listen to them, saying that purity built up the state, and after kept it from decay. They go further, saying that people should abandon base ambition, because being too clever, having too much intellect, will make us proud and susceptible to impurity. However, despite such fine moral speeches, the meter, basic, and plodding, and the last line of the poem show that Yates holds them in contempt. They are three old rascals with no morals, and they laugh aloud at us. This is the first poem Yates has written in disgust about fellow politicians. Previously, he had criticized Mudgone McBride for her misguided devotion to a cause, but he never accused her of being a liar or fraud. He spent 3 years after Lily's murder facing down public criticism, concealing acute grieving and social embarrassment from public view, and trying his best to live with his family.